I'm Jim Czek.
And I'm Renee Merrifield.
We're here with Beyond the Ballot. Lots to get through today. The political scene never ceases to deliver, right? And there's lots to deliver on.
Absolutely. While the Prime Minister may be on vacation, his ministers are certainly out and about. So lots of chatter out there.
So they are having that cabinet meeting today to talk about the Trump tariffs, but Carney is already positioning for Canadians, I guess, more so that, don't expect a free trade deal. There's going to be some tariffs no matter what.
Yeah, there never was going to be a tariff-free deal. The telegraphing that he did during the election was, I think, really unfortunate. I think that people believed that he, as an economist, would be able to navigate these waters in a much better way than what he has. But truthfully, I'm not seeing anything unique about his negotiation. And in fact, I feel more and more almost panicked that he move on with it and keep things moving forward. I'm watching other countries secure their deals with the U.S. and the farther back we get in the queue, the worse the deal that we are going to get.
Yeah, there's another deal announced this morning, and I can't remember the country now. It just escapes me, and it was just kind of an obscure country, too. There was a deal announced today. So, and I think, the bad thing of what they did in the election helped them win the election. They fired up, especially the boomer crowd, and just elbows up, we're going to take it to Trump. And now he has to walk back all that stuff. And I think, most people, reasonable people like yourself, and that we understood that, there's no such thing as no tariffs that there's going to happen, because we've had them for a long time, though, too, like on softwood and different things.
Yeah.
But that crowd that wanted, wanted a victory is going to have a tough time dealing with what actually is going to shake out of this, I think.
Yeah, and not to preempt our later conversation about the disclosures that took place this last week with the Prime Minister having to disclose all of the owned companies and owned stocks of those companies. But it's not really a huge mystery as to why he's being a little bit more passive about the tariffs than what we had originally anticipated. I don't think, number one, he's in a secure enough position as Prime Minister with a minority government to go up against the dairy, consortium, or to go up against those that he might have to in order to secure a deal and to take off some of those tariffs that we have, for U.S. goods coming into the country. And I also don't think that he wants to injure those U.S. companies to any large extent. So I don't think we're in a strong position. And I don't think that the Prime Minister is in a particularly strong position in a minority government to make some of those truly dramatic moves that would be necessary in order to elbows up against Trump.
I think the one thing is, in that auto sector, there's a lot of self-inflicted damage there with this EV mandate still being held on to. And then if the tariffs stick around with the auto manufacturing sector, I think that could spell the end of the auto sector here in Canada.
Yeah, we have to tread very carefully. This is a massive sector for Ontario and parts of Quebec. I do think that we need to take this more seriously. I think that the EV mandate has very much so injured that industry. And I think that the billions of dollars that have been promised towards the EV industry have not come to fruition and have not resulted in the number of jobs that we were looking for. So it's too late to backpedal on those investments, but it's not too late to backpedal on the EV mandate. The scary part for me is that even if the federal government releases that EV mandate, BC still has its own, and it's even more aggressive than what the federal government has right now. And that signals a huge detrimental effect to BC buyers and BC car industry.
Yeah, and then the BC one has to be more like a virtue signaling thing, because two things come to mind there. One, there is no auto sector in British Columbia, so what are we affecting by our BC regulations? Two, the air moves throughout the globe, so BC can't, it's not in a silo. You can't say, oh, we're going to have clean air in BC while the rest of the world dies, if that's your thought. Like, it just makes no sense why they would have their own EV mandate other than virtue signaling.
And furthermore, BC Hydro doesn't make enough electricity for the electrification goals of that EV mandate or any of the electrification goals of even, the different buildings that they're now requiring to go electric, with electricity. And so what we're seeing is, this importing of electricity from both Alberta, which is natural gas created, and Washington, which is both natural gas and coal created. And in the end, we're importing these and we don't have to count them as part of our emissions because it's in, you count in the area of production, not consumption. And so, or the jurisdiction of production, not consumption. And so, I'm looking at this and it is nothing more than virtue signaling. We have to be a good participant on a global scale. And this is just a very, very poorly thought out piece of legislation that then Minister Josie Osborne should have never moved forward with.
There you go, getting common sense in the way of a really good narrative. So.
Well, I'll tell one story. One of the stories, because I had the privilege of negotiating this bill in debate, and I got this one letter from a car dealership in Dawson Creek, and I won't say which one because there's only 3. But I got this one letter that they had gone to BC Hydro and they had been mandated to put in an EV charger. And so they said, we want to put in this EV charger. We need this amount of electricity in order to do so. And BC Hydro said no. So they appealed BC Hydro's decision and said, with all due respect, we need to put this in so that we can, provide for the electrification goals. Can you reconsider? They responded back, and I have this whole letter interchange. BC Hydro responded with this: we are unfortunately unable to give you the necessary electricity in order to power that charger. However, you can consider alternate sources of power, such as solar in Dawson Creek, which for many
lots of panels,
a total of 5 hours of sunlight, or diesel. And those are the 2 options that were given.
That's what I mean.
So, you want to talk about virtue signaling? That is a virtue signal. You can power your electric charger with diesel.
So if I was a dealership, I just would have put a sign up there next to a 110 volt plug-in and said, "There's your EV charger. Enjoy."
Powered with diesel.
Oh my God. But I think the bigger part is, Aaron O'Toole talks about this, and I've seen it come out of the States quite a bit right now too, is I think, Canada and the MPs here are focusing so much on the tariffs that we're missing the big game that's being played in the United States. And that big game is bringing manufacturing back, bringing the AI plants. We just seen the announcement by Meta today. We talked about it. They're building a plant, and I can't remember which state it's in now, Pennsylvania or somewhere, but it's almost the size of Manhattan, one AI cluster that is using more energy, 5 gigawatts, than Kelowna uses, 20 times the amount that Kelowna uses. And that's just Meta. And then there's Amazon that's doing a 2.5 gigawatt factory. And this is going throughout the US, and this is Colossus with Elon Musk, and Microsoft is refiring that nuclear plant in 3 Mile Island, all kinds of stuff that's happening, Apple investing billions. We're so focused on trying to get tariffs down that we're not figuring out how to attract investment back to Canada. And I think that's where we're missing out on the real game. Trump's got us looking at tariffs. Meanwhile, he's attracting all the business in the United States.
Oh, 100%. I'll give an example. Boise, Idaho, right now, population throughout the Treasure Valley is about 1 million people, but they currently have an Amazon mega distribution center, which is like mostly robotics, so it's not a huge amount of jobs.
1 million robots in Amazon.
Exactly. It's truly, I mean, if you want to see something spectacular, go down to Boise, Idaho, and take a look at. It's actually in Nampa, but it's a 4-story warehouse, and it's massive with all these semis all around it. And I was like, how do you get, robots, or how do you get people, distributing all of those packages on 4 stories? And they said, it's not people, it's robots. And you go in and it's all robotics. It's absolutely, truly remarkable. But they have Micron that has invested $26 billion. And not only is Micron there, and you think, well, that's like, 2,700 jobs that they have once that plant is up and running. But they have like 37 cranes right now on that plant. It's absolutely truly remarkable in how it's being built. But they also have a hit list of 200 other companies that they want to come to Boise for their supply chain to be complete. So not only is the Economic Development Commission going off and finding Micron, but they're now after 200 other companies to try and solicit them to come. They're giving them tax incentives. They're expediting permits and partnering with the different communities to give them land. And they have a tremendous amount of industrial land that's available. But to your point, Meta has a new plant that's going in there. Google has a new plant that's going in there. Like the amount of infrastructure and the amount of jobs and the amount of AI technology that's going into this little tiny area of Treasure Valley is mind-blowing, mind-blowing. And the economic output of this tiny little valley is extraordinary. So anyone who thinks that, we're not behind the eight ball, like take a look at Boise, Idaho. It's the sleepiest you'd think, town that you'd ever imagine. And it is absolutely on fire right now economically in a positive way.
So these mega giants are going to where the energy is. And I just want to say, knock, knock, Canada. Guess who has lots of energy? I know Kevin O'Leary is trying to do something in the north of Alberta there because it's cold temperature, which would cool the computers, the superclusters, and also cheap LNG. And to top it off, here's Mark Carney. We'll talk about this in a second, though. Brookfield Asset Management just sold a bunch of power to Google, Alphabet. And I can't remember the number right now, but we said it this morning. But in the billions of dollars. So here's Brookfield making money off of this. Yet where is the people knocking on the door in Canada and said, hey, let's do some stuff? All I see right now is photo ops from the MPs, and they're so worried about elbows up. They're not in the game. And Trump's still putting out tweets and saying, you want to get no tariffs? Move to the United States. I'll get you approval in a week, right? Do you know what I mean? Like in Canada, 20 years to permit a mine.
Yeah. And you know what, to your point, one of the things that I think is really dangerous right now is that we have a truly populist government. We've got ministers that are running around doing these kind of testers and like, whether it's Champagne that's saying like, hey, what do you think we should cut? Or what do you think we don't need? I mean, that's an absolute ridiculous responsibility to give to the population of Canada. But right now, Carney does not have direction. He does not have a vision. He does not say we are going to be an energy giant and this is how we're going to do it. Mines will be expedited. LNG will be expedited. We are going to have pipelines and here's where they're going to go. Like we do not have a collective plan right now that says this is who we are and this is where we're going. And that is a scary, scary thing. One, because we only have a government for 12 to 18 months if they don't get their act together. But two, because Canada is desperate for this right now. We absolutely have to get more of an economy running forward. And right now, we do not have that in play.
Yeah, I think you can ask the average Canadian the simple question, what's Canada's strength? And I can bet you 70+% would say energy. They would say energy and resources. That would be, I think. But then if you talk to Melanie Joly, like she says that, they're working on a strategy for brain gain. I'm just like I'll just leave it there. Like there's somebody that needs some brain gain for sure.
Yes. That is, that is a really unfortunate comment made by her. Right now, the brain drain is going south, and it's going south in droves because the investment dollars are there, the companies are being purchased and taken there, and that is where the absolute opportunities are for those that have creative capital.
And we just look to our fearless leader, who's there's no doubt he's an intelligent guy. Where's his investments?
Oh, in the U.S. I brought that up right before, and he moved Brookfield to New York last October. That was his call. That was what he did, and clearly to make use of opportunities that are down there. You look at his disclosure statement; it's scary how much of the U.S. that he owns, and also oil and gas outside of Canada. He profits when Canada is dormant in terms of its oil and gas production. That is scary, and for him to be profiting off of other countries while Canada's citizens literally lay with an economy that's shrinking, I think is absolutely I was going to say a stronger word, but I won't. it's very destructive. Let's put it that way.
Pierre Poilievre put out a couple of pieces there just recently on after the disclosure. And he said, like that Mark Carney claimed during the election that he owns nothing but cash and personal real estate. In fact, according to Poilievre, he owns 574 stocks and all deferred profits, stock options, Brookfield. I mean, I said early on when he was running, I said, when he was kind of pretending to be just this average guy with, meager holdings and that, I said, either he's got to be one of the worst CEOs ever because he's running one of Canada's biggest companies, and most of those guys are making scads of money and have lots of money. He's got to be one of the worst CEOs, and he's lying. And turns out,
He was lying. And honestly, Brian really talked about that throughout the election. He tracked how many times Carney outright lied and said, like, how are we accepting of this? This is something that the Canadian people have not held our politicians accountable for. And, whether it was Trudeau and the amount of lies or half-truths that he was sharing, whether it was David Eby and the amount of double talk and lies that have been shared there, or whether it's now Carney. Like, I'm very disappointed with the amount of mistruths and half truths and outright lies that have been shown and come to light over the course of a very, very short time frame, i.e., 7 months so far.
Yeah, the message to the people, including to their state-funded broadcasters, that like the mouthpieces, buy Canadians, support Canada. Like, we're going to get to a piece later where it says you don't even want to talk to those people in the United States. And meanwhile, back at the ranch, Mark Carney, the majority of his stock portfolio is American. He moved the headquarters of Brookfield there to access American capital. All his actions speak to the United States as a much better place to invest. And that's what's happening. We're seeing people leave. We played a clip a while back with Chamath, who a former Canadian, and the head of I can't remember his name now, the head of the Shopify, saying Canada has one big strength, and that's energy. In most nations, rich nations, it's energy times productivity. And yet, the Liberals continue to want to suppress energy, like our Trump card. Literally, our Trump card is being suppressed while we talk about how we're going to attract all these, Melanie Jolie says we're going to attract all the best and brightest out of the United States. They're going to come up here. Someone should remind her for double the taxation, half, 1/50th of the wage. What? Like, Meta just paid $100 million for a guy that they stole from Apple.
Yeah. And I think that we need to give our head a shake. I mean, the tax brackets in the U.S. are far more favorable, as are the wages. Because their productivity numbers are so much bigger. Their profitability numbers are so much bigger, and they're investing more into their staff. I mean, the key point for me is that Carney knows this. Carney knows how bad the regulatory environment is in Canada and how bad Canadian companies are for investment because of it. And he knows that. And it's shown in what Brookfield has invested in, what his own holdings are, and yet he is refusing to change that. So by that refusal, he is signaling that he is not changing the tide for Canadian businesses, and therefore he will not change the tide for Canadian citizens, because without an economy, we're dead in the water, and we're going to have to make some significant cuts, which is what he is going to have to do in the near future.
I would say that looking through his portfolio, he has a balanced portfolio. He has a lot of the stuff on the other side of the border that's really doing well. And all his climate agenda stuff is obviously what Canada is driving. So he kind of like playing on both sides of that fence there. And the Canada side, a lot of his stocks or like investments are in kind of climate-based agenda.
Yeah, but he's profiting from the bureaucratic environment, right? He's profiting from how difficult it is to do business with that environmental agenda. I mean, if I remind us that the BC chief economist, both David Williams and Ken Peacock came out with a very scathing economic analysis based solely on the NDP's own economic forecast and economic numbers that have been generated generated by the Clean BC agenda, and foretold how far the BC economy would fall with that particular agenda. We're seeing that in real time right now, and if we broaden that to the federal government's climate agenda, it holds true as well. We simply cannot be competitive when we tax, and when we look at industry carbon tax, we cannot have an industry that is competitive when we labor them with taxes. And whatever you tax becomes more expensive and is less saleable in the global scheme.
Well, that's what David Eby gave away a contract to somebody that doesn't have industrial carbon tax because they're cheaper.
Well, and we look at our human rights, we look at all of our employment rights, and then we wonder why we can't actually build ships, and ferries here in Canada. We have a regulatory environment that precludes actually being able to deliver in a competitive way those large pieces of infrastructure, and that is a tragedy. And instead of investing in really bolstering and creating an economy of scale in that industry, we chose to give $4 billion, $1 billion of the Fed's money and $3 billion of our own to China.
Well, we'll talk about that in a bit here, but you mentioned this right as we got going. Francois Philippe Champagne, Canada's finance minister, a man without any ideas. And me and Ian have him always competing with some other people on this show here for Fool of the Day. But he comes out and he's asking Canadians what they think should be in the budget. First of all, we'd like a budget. We asked for a budget. I mean, it's the normal thing. Most people are supposed to put forward a budget. So now he's like, I think he's trying to get Canadians to kind of own part of that budget, and somebody went and did the test or the survey questions. So obviously when the Liberals do the thing, they do it all in leading things, like you get to only choose from a few things. Like, it just blows me away that they won't table an honest budget. They won't show us what they're trying to do, and now they're trying to almost put Canadians on the hook for it too. Well, this person asked for this. This person, when you gave them a leading question.
The danger of a populist agenda is that you're going to end up with a Frankenstein bride, when it comes to an actual vision forward or an economy and budget spending. Do I think that they're trying to scapegoat the Canadian public? Absolutely. They're going to say Canadians asked for this, Canadians wanted this. The reality is, you do not, as a leader, let the vision or let the direction be set by democracy or by agenda. It's very dangerous, and a polling number is not what is going to help you set a really robust budget or a robust agenda. But do I think they're trying to scapegoat? Absolutely. I also think they're trying to test out, what is popular, what is not popular, because if they fumble on this front, there is a very, very large chance that they could be back at the polls. And at the polls, I don't know where they would fare. I mean, right now the polling numbers seem to indicate that they're still neck and neck with the Conservatives. It looks like we're at a 43-42 split, but the NDP right now are dead in the water. So that does not usually bode very well for the Conservative vote. So are they wanting to go back to the polls right away? I don't think so, and I think that this is an attempt to circumvent that.
I think Mark Carney is a sharp guy. I think he's a very smart guy, and he's going to have to fire some people, I think, just to show that he means business, because it's the same group of Liberals that are just playing games, it seems like. And I think he told them before going to this cabinet minister, because whenever Trump upped his rhetoric, all the MPs were jumping in there and they were just being, divisive and, trying to poke the bear, Donald Trump. But now they're basically very quiet. I'm sure he's told them, shh, like that's enough out of you, right? But, guys like Francois Philippe Champagne, I don't know if he even knows what his job is or his function is. I think he's a person without any ideas. The thing that I think Carney must recognize is that how do we attract investment capital to Canada? We got to cut the red tape. We got to fast track things. He got his bill, right, that the Conservatives helped him get. So then show us the money, show us the beef, right? Let's get to business.
And he hasn't yet. He hasn't done anything meaningful as of yet. And the social, the politicos are definitely drawing attention to that. It's basically like, what are you doing and which way are we going and how are we going to get there? And right now, Carney does not seem to have control of his caucus yet. There are a lot of different activists out there on their little political campaigns, and he does not have an agenda that's set yet. CMHC came out with some dramatic changes that will basically render the rental, purpose-built rental program dead in the water. I do not know how Gregor Robertson is going to actually, right the ship on housing, but it is fairly interesting. I mean, Carney controls a lot of the housing industry through Brookfield, so I don't know how he's going to actually
and modular housing.
Yeah, and modular housing. So I don't know how he's going to navigate those waters without having to declare his personal interest with the 103 personally owned companies that he has, and his chief of staff or one of his staff members that's going to put the screen up. So, with all of this rhetoric that's going on and with all of his conflicts, I don't know how he actually creates an economy and moves it all forward. But we need him to. So, I'm hopeful and I'm wishing him good luck because right now Canada desperately needs it.
And I did see CBC's David Cochran run and cover for him a little bit, but I have another clip here from CBC, and because this American kind of Canadian, they're trying to build it into something where it's personal for the people, because it's the politicians that are having these trade negotiations. I don't know how CBC is trying to turn it into how you need to fight with your friends in the United States. But let's play this clip first, and then we'll talk about it. I got no volume.
Relationship as a nation with the United States, our friends, our neighbors, and our family members who live in the U.S. and colleagues. It's become so difficult in terms of handling the conversations we're having delicately. So talk to us about that and how you're planning on exploring that issue next hour.
Yeah, so, some time ago, before this trade war, we did a version of the topic that we're doing in the second hour, asking people about their relationships with people in the United States. And we learned a couple of things. First of all, a lot of Canadians have family and dear friends in the United States. I mean, more than acquaintances, really close friends, people that they would go and vacation with, and so there are a lot of Canadians with ties to Americans. And the second thing we discovered is how difficult it was for many of them to deal with Americans because of Trump and the MAGA movement. Especially, they walk into a house where Fox News is on, and for a lot of Canadians, they kind of see that, not all, but a lot, and it seems like an alternate version of reality. And so now we have the trade war. Now we have elbows up. Now we have the Canadians who
What?
As someone who has lived in the U.S. for many years, and as someone who still has family members who live in the U.S., and someone who has friends that live in the U.S., what I would say is that no, relationships are not difficult when you can have adult conversations with people. And, even those of my family members that may support Trump, that's fine. Like I can have conversations in relationship with them outside of their political beliefs or their political, alliances. What I would say is that we desperately need the public to have alliances and to have those conversations and to really help each other to understand what the impact is on one another. I can say, hey, I'm really sorry that you guys have tariffs right now coming from all these countries that you're importing from, because that makes your life more expensive. That's a good conversation to have, because a lot of Americans may not understand that the tariff isn't on the other country; it's on them. It's on what's coming into to them for sale. So I mean, again, mainstream media and CBC in particular, they're grasping at straws right now, trying to create I guess chaos that is not. And if anyone has ties to other countries, look no further than our prime minister, who has a dramatic amount of ties to U.S. people and companies and EU people. Oh my goodness, his ties go very, very dramatically.
I just couldn't believe it. He says, you walk into a house and they have Fox News playing, you got your elbows up. So what do you do? Is that you pick a fight then? Is that what you do? You put your elbows up and you start fighting them because they have Fox News? I would say if I walk into a house and somebody has CBC on, I'm just like, are you sure? Are you okay? Are you still watching this stuff? Like, why? Because only 1.7% of Canadians watch it. Why are you watching it? Because this is like during the COVID era, they took away your freedom because they won't wear a mask. But come on, CBC. Because somebody watches Fox News, we could use Fox News here in Canada to balance off the other side. Because at least in the States, they have Fox and CNN and MSNBC. They have like diversity of voices, where in Canada we have CBC and CTV, which is a mirror of CTV or CBC. So we don't have a national voice that is on the right.
I totally agree. We need a lot more diversity within our media channels, and Jim, that's why I'm so appreciative of Now Media and all that you try to do in terms of present different opinions and different perspectives. We absolutely need more of it, not less.
We need less of Bill C-18 as well, that suppresses local independent media, and close to 100 have failed since the introduction of that 2 years ago. Well, they amplify and continue to fund the CBC and increase their funding, in which the executives then, as soon as they got their raise, their funding increase, they went out and gave themselves a raise. Good work, CBC.
Yeah, and good work, government.
And then this other clip here we're going to play, and this is from this RCMP officer, and this one is super strange. Like the CBC, the question I would have asked. Well, maybe we'll play the clip first, and then I'll say the question that should have happened right after.
Well, radicalization in general quite often will show by people isolating themselves and changing their behavior, like changing what they're saying on a subject, like becoming more extremist. Like, and if someone you know was very believed in equal gender rights, but all of a sudden are leaning towards like traditional values, and that might be a sign that they're becoming more extremist.
Yeah, nothing like
What?
like saying traditionalized or extremist. I think I'm hoping that this is a language issue and not understanding how language will translate in different locations. But I can tell you that from having family members that do have different structures within their own family unit, they do feel very attacked and very isolated in making some of those choices. I'm an equal rights person. I think that men or women should have the freedom to choose to stay at home and be at home if they want to, and have the family be their primary career. I think that that's what a feminist movement should have given us, is the ability to choose, not to need it to be one way or the other. So for her to, this RCMP officer to come out with that sort of a statement, I think is a real tragedy. The other thing, and I'm going to take this on a little bit of a different slant, and you can pull me back online if you want to, but the other thing is that we desperately need population growth. And the only way that we are going to have our population grow is to actually make it easier for couples and young couples to have families. And I think that we have to get way more tax incentives for those that want to stay at home while the kids are young. We have not been successful, and the federal government has not been successful in the $10 a day daycare. I think the money should follow the child, and that money should go to that child, regardless of whether that family makes a choice for daycare or for a stay-at-home parent. So I think there are huge opportunities for governments of all levels to really come in with some very progressive and very aggressive tax strategies that will allow parents and grandparents to stay at home with their children and grandchildren, and that will allow couples to make that decision to have more children than just 0 or 1, because I think that there's a really, really significant issue that we're going to be faced with if we don't do something fairly dramatic fairly soon. And I think that China is experiencing that to some extent with their one-child policy, and suddenly they don't have enough children to take over, and their economy starts to shrink.
Yeah, they switch gears on that. But there are many nations out there right now that are really rewarding people to stay at home and build larger families even. I think in Hungary, if you have like 4 kids, they give you like a car and a house and all kinds of stuff. And
Hungary, they gave you tax. You didn't have to pay taxes while you were something.
Yeah,
to that effect.
that's what it is. There's a bunch of nations out there that are doing a lot, including Russia. And there's even one so-called nation here in Canada that does it. It's called Quebec, right? So they have way better incentives than the most of Canada. There's so many different things that Quebec has that most of Canada doesn't. And, Blanchette, the leader of the bloc, has said, like it's up to, Alberta to ask for these same rights, because like they don't, CRA doesn't even collect their taxes. And that's what Danielle Smith has put forward, just like, well, we want to collect our own taxes and then submit to CRA. But yeah, so Quebec promotes more their culture, their language and families and stuff like that. But it seems like we've lost our ways. But going back to this RCMP officer, though, the reporter the next question should have been just as simple as, are you stating that as a personal opinion, or is this the policy of the RCMP? Because I just want to be clear, because this is big, right? So this is big. If this is the policy of the RCMP, this is probably the story of the month here, and she doesn't, right? So it's kind of just left.
And it is like, are you truly targeting those that have traditional values? Like that's like, are you watching those that choose traditional values?
Because the RCMP has already backtracked on it and said, oh no. But I mean, they should have went at it right then and said, is this the policy of the RCMP? Are you stating it for them? Because you're wearing the uniform. We're interviewing you because you're an RCMP officer, not because you're coming on here and this is a private discussion, right? We're not in a pub or something. And they didn't get pressed, and that was a miss by that reporter, or an intentional miss.
Yeah, and I think that right now, if we were to evaluate whether or not we're succeeding, I think we're not. More couples are choosing not to have children, and more couples are not able to actually, when they're hitting their late 20s, early 30s, are not able to purchase, a home. The average first-time home buyer in the Toronto and area, but the whole of the Toronto metropolitan is 40. The average first-time home buyer. That is a tragedy, and that is a failure as a society. And we have to look at those aspects and those issues and do better. Carney is smart, though. He knows he either has to tax his way or cut his way to a better fiscal position. And I was going to say a balanced budget, but I that is even so far outside of the realm of possibility. He's going to try and cut his way rather than tax his way, hopefully, because the Canadian tax burden is so vicious. We used to have the income splitting, a capability. Getting back to that would help couples make that decision to really spearhead one of their careers while the other makes that choice to stay at home and help out with the family responsibilities. And
I think we're going to talk about this next year is the young people. People used to start a lot younger having children too, but now some of them can't even get a job, and we're going to talk about that in a second here. But that's why the government's offering IVF, because as you get later on in life, it gets harder and harder to have children. Obviously, the more fruitful childbearing years are when you're younger, and if we're pushing people out further and further, like you said, the average age of a first-time home buyer, and that we need to figure out programs that allow people to start families earlier and then make that a priority.
And it's talking if we gave it if we emulated what's happening, from a I'm hesitant to use the word health concern because I'm not trying to say IVF, et cetera. But it's like talking about preventative medicine rather than or dealing with the core issue rather than just the symptoms. And giving free IVF is dealing with a symptom rather than the core issue, which is couples can't have kids earlier because they simply can't afford to do so under the current tax regime. There were previous tax regimes that you would be able to, but you can't right now, and that's truly a tragedy.
I would recommend all the MPs that are making decisions to watch you and I on this show, and maybe they get some ideas that'll help, because you're bang on there. IVF is a treatment of the symptom. The cause is what we're going to talk about here next, is the immigration policy that are just kind of destroyed our housing, our jobs market, our healthcare crisis. And this is Labor Minister Patty Hajdu. This is the Hollydome Blacklock story, kind of apologizing to, the youth that are now seeing unemployment rates, across Canada at 14.7, in some areas of Canada, as high as 17.7, a number that we haven't seen since like the 2009 financial crisis, barring the pandemic stuff. But I mean, that was everybody was paid to stay home. But right now, like the youth are having a really tough time. Did you freeze?
Oh, sorry, was there a clip? I thought there was a clip.
What's that?
I was waiting for the clip.
No clip. Sorry.
This is totally true, and in my company, we chose to open and double the number of internships and co-op programs that we're doing with the university and throughout, simply because we started hearing through the grapevine and starting hearing from our own kids in their 20s that how difficult it was to find employment. We recently had a lunch with these youth that are in our employ, and what they were talking about was how many of their friends were unable to find work this summer. It is a huge tragedy, and when our next generation isn't able to find work, there's something terribly wrong that robs them of experiences, that robs them of the independence that they're seeking, and it really makes it more difficult for them in the future. So I think this is a again, it's like the temperature in the pot going up so slowly that we don't really understand that we're being boiled, and it's a huge red flag that needs to be paid attention to in greater number.
Yeah, this briefing note that was given to the minister, Patty Hajdu, was just, it said youth employment has been increasing, but there was no reason given for it. And I see this in the media outlets as well. They're just like, oh, youth numbers are increasing, but they don't state the obvious reason. I could just show them a chart if they'd like to see the immigration and then lay over top the unemployment and say, do you see anything there? Because like, again, supply and demand, that's pretty obvious, yet they don't do it because, there was that question a reporter was trying to ask Mark Miller there. And then right away, Mark Miller went to, I understand you don't like immigrants. He implied racism right away, as opposed to, no, our healthcare system is overtaxed. People, how many millions of Canadians can't get access to a family doctor? Can't get a job for youth. Can't access like healthcare. Rents continue to go up. Look at this Toronto, the crisis in Toronto. They started building, 350 square foot condos because they were intended for the immigrant market, right? And that the government was paying the rent, and all of a sudden that dries up and there it goes. And the same thing in the colleges and in the universities. We're living off of the enhanced fees that they gave to foreign students.
Yeah, it's truly a tragedy. And the government doesn't seem to be, changing course fast enough. It certainly does not seem to be, making enough changes. The other thing that I'm gonna give as an affect as well is the minimum wage continuing to skyrocket. That minimum wage goes up, it's more and more difficult to hire the number of people that even your company may need, because it's just not financially feasible. That, in addition to the 5 paid sick days, even for part timers, the amount of 13 statutory holidays, and then the EHT, which is 2%. Like everything adds up. And companies are literally crumbling under this burden. And what you're going to see is a company choosing not to employ, that 19, 20, 21-year-old because they simply cannot afford, someone that isn't as productive as they should be at that high of a rate. And so it's just proven to be very difficult. And we become the authors of our own demise as we, make these and put these demands on employers that they start to crumble underneath.
Yeah, I do know of a local employer that had, and I won't name them. They had 5 locations, and they had about 100 staff members in those locations, and they were entry-level jobs as mostly students. And they said they closed them all because they couldn't afford what you just said, the EHT, the sick days, the increasing minimum wage, and the margins in their industry was so thin they just could not compete. And they just said that's it. They were a very popular local brand that had to. It was over for them.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. You're going to see more and more of that story being told. And again, you can have a strong left wing, labor proponents, but unless it's balanced with what the metrics are within business, you're going to get an unsustainable system that is going to result in a higher unemployment rather than what we all want, which is great employment and great paychecks.
I think one of the things the media and the government sometimes really plays Canadians as stupid, because it's pretty obvious, them omitting that information that this was caused by the record immigration. I mean, anybody that can look at a bar chart or a line graph can see what's causing this, but they just pretend that it doesn't exist. But let's switch to BC here. John Rustad put out this piece, and this is a shame here. We have this young girl that is now relegated to go to a GoFundMe. Her mother's put up a GoFundMe there for Charlene Pollock for that very expensive medication. And John Rustad has put out a tweet on it and saying that, this shouldn't happen. And then Dr. Anna Kindi also says our healthcare in BC is in a quandary. We have MAID, but where's help for people like Charlene Pollock here? That's, in her last years of her life there, fighting through this and not getting the funding for the medication that she so dearly needs.
And I mean, when you hear the whole of the story and the mother tell the story about how, she went from, having seizures all the time to literally being able to go to church, to school, and to having a normal life for the most part, being very vibrant, and how this medication changed her life. I don't know how you could not be compelled by the story. I think that the ministry and the NDP have done such a disservice to this family, and honestly, it's a tragedy. It is almost criminal. It is choosing to allow her to go back and be relegated to die. Obviously, with her condition, she, average lifespan is between 9 and 13 years old, so she doesn't have a long life. She's already 10. So even if she made it to the absolute, top of that average, you're talking about 3 years of a medication. If she lives in the hospital for 3 years, it's going to cost the government that amount of money. It's $1 million every year for every single hospital bed in BC. There is so much cost to the system. There is so much cost. Other than, why wouldn't you want to keep, a child happy and vibrant for that longer term? And the callousness that this seems to be occurring with is really remarkable. And that committee, I would love to see someone FOI who that committee is that's making that decision, and know how many experts are actually on that committee that are experts in this field and for this medication and for this, amazing little girl's, condition. So for me, I think this is a huge fumble from the NDP, and I do not think this is going to age well at all, because that little girl is going to get more sick and her story is going to become even more tragic.
Here's your chance, Mr. Eby, to go in and actually just say, we're going to pay for it. And, to gain some political capital or whatever, but also for the betterment of the child, even forgetting about the political capital, just get it done. This is, I don't know how many British Columbians that would say personally, we don't want to give that girl the medication.
No.
It would be tough, right?
People understood how much, how expensive medications are, and how many other medications we pay for certain individuals. It's quite remarkable. I know that, and I don't even want to mention them for fear that they get unfunded, but there are medications for those with cystic fibrosis as well that cost that same dollar figure, that $800,000 a year, $900,000 a year. Why we are not able to provide it for the one child in BC that requires it is absolutely baffling to me. And the MDT and NDP blunder. And I truly believe that between the Chinese fairies and the callousness that they're dealing with our medical healthcare system, those two are going to be really big. I was talking with a neighbor the other day as we were walking dogs, and I said, housing has been the story for the last 10 years. I think that healthcare is going to be the story for the next.
People can love or hate Trump, but I guarantee if this was an American child and he heard the story, he would just say, get it done.
Absolutely. And that's, that's leadership. Eby looks tired. I don't know where his head's at right now. He seems powerless which is not a good look for a premier. I mean, he's powerless against the tariffs. He has said very little for the copper tariffs that came out. Like, where's his action on that? I mean, we're one of the largest copper providers, so I don't know where his the fire in his belly is at right now, because and I'm hoping that he gets it back, because right now BC is pretty desperate, and we need to get some wins here.
Eleanor Sturko put out a piece too that this is she retweeted this thing. The DEA busts Canadian narco whose Chinese supplier promised to ship 100 kilos of fentanyl precursors per month from Vancouver to LA. And she's been saying, I've been long saying that the radical EB NDP drug soft on crime policies have emboldened foreign government-backed transnational crime organizations to turn BC into a hub. And that's been said by Kash Patel of the FBI too. And they need to get serious about that as well. They really need to get serious about that, because people are dying from this, right? They need to get serious and start inspecting, start doing some stuff. It's been said over and over that even, I think it was CSIS that said Canada is ripe for foreign interference.
And we are, we have been warned by our agencies. We have been warned by even our journalists, our investigative journalists, whether it's Sam Cooper or Kim Boland. We absolutely have been warned, and we know that it's happening. We know from the RCMP that it's happening. Any of the reports that are like, it's so minor, like that Manhattan report, I'm like, where are you getting the information from? Because it simply is not true. I mean, back in 2014, when fentanyl started being a huge issue, and it was declared an emergency back in 2016, and I was on the Health Authority board at that time, and we got briefed by the RCMP. They knew exactly how it was coming in through Vancouver. They had the whole drug highway mapped. They knew where it was being shipped from. They had all the information, and I was like, why are you guys not then cutting it off at the head? Why is it getting all the way to Kamloops and to Kelowna? And their simple answer was that we don't have the political will to actually do it. It is time. And I do not like that the U.S. government and the U.S. Congress people and the U.S. president are the ones that are actually holding us to account and holding our politicians to account. But dear God, if it's going to be something, like, at least let it be that, because we really need to get serious about this, and we need to get our port under control, which it is not.
Then Harman Bangu again with the BC Ferries thing, which I think is going to be the biggest NDP scandal this year, maybe of their leadership. Says that C-SPAN was ready to build the ferries, 10,000 more jobs, billions in economic activity. We know that, put $1 into the economy, it multiplies itself. And then there's a journalist that reached out there and tried to get on their FOI some of the information. They got back a bunch of redacted pages, basically, that protects the short list and the reasons for choosing China to build our 4 ships. So what are they hiding? Just show us then, right? Let the sun shine in and show us your logic and reasoning.
Yeah, be transparent about it. I mean, this is an issue that is like, whether it's Carney owning oil and gas outside of Canada because he knows it's more competitive, or whether it's Eby buying, building the ferries outside of Canada because he knows it's more competitive. The reality is our regulatory burden is so significant and so severe that we are not competitive. And rather than taking our dollars and investing it and trying to gain some of that competitive advantage, we're taking those dollars and absolutely spending them in countries that do not have the same human rights issues or regulations, and do not have the same employee rights, and do not have the same steel requirements or steel tariffs,
industrial carbon tax, and blah blah blah. Right? Like, unbelievable.
It's truly remarkable, and absolutely, I think is one of those issues that is not going to age well for this government.
I would advise Canadians to put their elbows down, put their glasses on, and ask the government to show us what's going on. Stop with the shielding, stop with all the lack of transparency, and then show us ways that you're going to encourage people that have capital to invest it in Canada. Like, show us how you're going to cut regulation, show us how you're going to fast track projects, show us all these things. Again, elbows down, glasses on, and let's have a look, right? And this they're actually just playing Canadians as fools with this elbows up stuff.
Well, and playing us as fools when they choose to invest dollars in our own country. I mean, it's really, really tragic.
Well, it's been an hour, and it's been a jam-packed hour, as always. It's been great. We're going to try and add a new thing. We're going to bring in some guests every now and then for the show, which will add a little more, dynamics to it. So I think it's a great show, and I do thank you, Renee, for always being on here and sharing your wealth of knowledge with Canadians that need to know how to put their glasses on and have a look, and how do we get Canada into the game.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and thank you guys for listening.
I think we lost you there for that clip there. Sorry, if you want to just repeat what you just said, that'd be great.
Oh, sorry. I said thank you for listening, and thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna